Coming up, Cam Thomas made his return to the court for the Brooklyn Nets. What did we learn from what we saw on the tape and also what we heard from Jordi Fernandez? We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Check out FanDuel today. And Doug, we were waiting for this one. Kind of a slow play. Talked about it over the last couple of weeks. All the maybe getting back to 5-on-5. And then in somewhat surprising fashion, it was blink of an eye. Cam Thomas returns. It comes in a loss against the Blazers. But there is some things to look at here when we talk about a player getting back on the court after a long absence over the last 2.5 months.
I mean, yeah, he's been out for like basically 2 months. But if you remember that he kind of came back for only 2 days, I mean, he's basically been out since November. It's been a really long time. He gets the 2 games thrown in on the 29th of December and then the 2nd of January, and then instantly lands back on the injured list. So nice to have Cam Thomas back on Friday against the Blazers. There's a decent amount to talk about, sort of like where he stands. I don't think we need to make a ton of proclamations based on this one game, though what Jordi Fernandez said about it is interesting too. But overall, nice to have Cam Thomas back. It was going to be butting up dangerously close to like a lost season, right? Like, which is where it was trending. Just he's been gone for so long, and these injuries where you rehab and then you come back and then you leave again are always the worst, because you just feel like, oh no, they brought him back too early, or like whatever happened. I don't think that's the case here, but overall, it has been a little bit underrated, like simply how much time he's missed, because it has been sort of just months and months and months, but good to have him back.
Yeah, 20 games he's played in, 18 that he started. So we're talking about the Nets being 59 games through the season. So we only have, 23 more games left. So getting back out of the way here, we'll figure, okay, if he stays healthy and plays out the rest of the season, he's still only going to get in 50% of the games for the year. So nice to see him back out there. 21 minutes, 7-17 from the field, takes 4 attempts from beyond the arc, misses all of those, gets to the line just a couple times. That's probably the first thing that you look at when you talk about him, getting back on the court and getting into his rhythm. We know how good he is attacking at the basket and getting contact and getting to the foul line. Still gives you 16 points over the course of it, and did have 3 turnovers as well. So rust, of course, like you have to anticipate that that's going to be the case. The funny part about it, as you mentioned, for how long that he's been gone, it's easy to forget that he's averaging over 24 points on the season, that he was knocking down over 36% from beyond the arc. He was knocking down almost 45% from the field. Like, this was supposed to be, though we always joke, what will we ever really learn, or will anyone change their position on where they stood on Cam Thomas? But this was supposed to be, in a rebuilding type of year, a year when we would get 70-plus games of Cam Thomas offensive basketball, and then potentially development of some of those secondary traits. So you have to kind of like reset yourself and get ready to dive in on 20-plus more games here, where hopefully we do learn a little bit more about Thomas, though I doubt we're going to change our opinion too much by the end of the year.
I mean, one thing about him, and look, you made a great point. It's that, like, there's definitely rust here. It's hard to take away, whatever the efficiency is going to be, the efficiency. Like we just said, he's barely played in like 3 months. Like, no one's going to come out and just light the world on fire, no matter how good you are. So that's just going to be what it is. I think when we look at Cam Thomas, this game aside, and then we'll see what happens sort of the rest of the season. One thing you notice about his stats, if you look at his stats this year and you look at his stats last year, where it's like, okay, like, decently different personnel, different coach, different everything. I mean, they're like exactly the same. His per minute stats are nearly, per minute and efficiency are like literally exactly the same. At the risk of just reading every single one off, it's last year 31.4 minutes, this year 31.8 minutes. So like the minutes are within decimal points of each other. 18 shots a game last year and this year, exactly. Field goal percentage, 44-44. 3-point percentage, 36-36. Get to the line a little bit more this year, so you like to see that. Free throw percentage, basically exactly the same. Assist rate per minute, 2.9 to 3.3, so up like a fraction this year. Rebounds, exactly the same. It's like exactly the same.
Cam
to the
Thomas,
almost,
Cam Thomas, like that. That's what he's going to be, and
it's
it's
pretty
good,
wild.
But yeah,
It is pretty wild. Like on just a rate and efficiency and by all those metrics, he's been exactly the same dude, even though things around him have changed. I don't know if that's the story or not. It's just something that's worth pointing out as he returns and as he gets back into the fold, that whatever you think about him, like we've enjoyed the Cam Thomas experience. So there's no complaints here, but it's just very funny to look at these two stat lines, knowing that a lot has changed between these two seasons for like everything else, right? Almost all the players, a lot of players that are different around him. For sure, the Jordi Fernandez experience is different. Like, it's just so funny when you see guys are like, that's just the guy. Like, this is what he does. It's this many points. It's this much. This is the shooting. This is the efficiency. These are the assists. This is just kind of everything when you're on the court.
And it's funny too, because, and you're right. Like, I agree with you. I mean, I don't have to agree with you. I agree with the numbers. They're all basically identical year over year with him. The unfortunate part probably is, one, we talked about this like at the beginning of the season. I thought that defensively you could just see a little bit of a different focus for him, and Jordi Fernandez set those expectations. We'll talk about that in a minute with the quote from Jordi after that game for him against the Blazers in his return. The unfortunate part for me probably was, you mentioned the 3.3. So, okay, like you're almost getting up to half an assist more per game this year over last year, which is nice. And he averaged, now again, put it in the context that in November, he only played in 7 games, but it was trending in 3.7. So he was like approaching 4, and then he goes down. And I can't use the stat where he plays 1 game in December and he gives you, 5 assists and say, well, he averaged 5 assists in the month of December. It was nice. Like, but that was the part that we wanted to maybe see, this area of growth. And now you can only look at least to this point, 7 games and be like, is that enough? Are we going to bank on what we saw there versus the total body of work and maybe what we'll see going forward? So it's good, just if nothing else, good that he's back out on the court. Hopefully stays healthy the rest of the way. Didn't play in the follow-up game. We expect that to be the case. Knock off the rust and see what it looks like going forward here. Not as many veterans around on this roster as when he was playing prior to the injury. Coming up here in a second, let's talk about Jordi Fernandez comments, because I loved what the coach had to say in his post game. Will Cam Thomas love that? We'll get into it here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over on FanDuel. The game tips off. NBA action is just getting started. No better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Look over on FanDuel. You can place those live bets throughout the game. We know it's been a fun experience betting on the Nets for the most part this season. Recent results, not aside. You're always going to stay in the action over on FanDuel. Maybe you're looking for a bigger payout. Combine your live bets into a same game parlay. You get late game rallies. Maybe you're going to root for someone to hit a clutch 3. Maybe you just think the Nets are going to come back late in the game. It's all there for you over on FanDuel. What else is over there right now? New FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. It's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the return of one Cam Thomas and then expectations for him over the remainder of this season. So when we talk about his return, we gave you the stat lines there. Okay, knock off the rust and we'll see where he goes from. But I do find it interesting when Jordi Fernandez in his post-game press conference, Eric Slater had asked, what are the thoughts and takeaways from Cam's performance? Quote, he got up 17 shots in 21 minutes. He got open. That's what he does. But again, I want him to score, play make, and defend. We'll hold each other accountable to be better. It was great to have him on the court. Great to see that he was able to get those shots up. And I'm pretty sure that he wants to get better and wants to help the team. Now, over on X, I said, I think this is a good thing, because the previous iterations of this team under different head coaches, you didn't know, does the organization even like this kid? What do they want him to do when he's on the court? What's his future going to look like? Since Jordi came in, he said this in the offseason. He said it early in the season. He wants Cam Thomas to be more of a complete player to the best of his abilities, right? To show the effort on both ends and to be a more complete offensive player. Does this feel like to you, first game back, knocking off the rust? Are you bullish on the idea that Jordi Fernandez is saying this because, hey, this is where I was coming from at the beginning of the year and this is where I am now? Or did it feel like, a little bit of heavy-handed love around, you just got back on the court after missing over 2 months and it's the same, yeah, he got up some shots, but we do want him to be better. I like what he said, but it is interesting that it's the first game back, first sample size, and it's immediately like, hey, you need to be the complete player, not the shot maker.
I mean, it's like a look behind the curtain of things we've wondered about what the coaching staff and front office probably thinks about Cam Thomas. Like we have often wondered this, right? It's like, are these things also important to them, right? And like we've not really been sure for a while about what the overall feelings are, and oftentimes you can know how a team feels about your wallet does a lot of talking, right? When you extend players and when you sign the contracts, like just like in our lives, our wallet does a lot of talking for us, like about where we're spending money. And the Nets wallet has not done it much, or it has or has not, depending on how you want to say it. Like the absence of truth might be truth, right? And so it's like, the fact that they haven't re-signed him to a contract, that tells you something. And then when Jordi says this, and he's not calling him out necessarily, but he's getting a little more specific, right, about what it is they're looking for him to do. And maybe I undersold it a little bit too when I read the stats, because 3.3, 2.9 assists to 3.3 is like a 15% increase. That's not nothing. Like if your portfolio went up 15% year over year, you'd feel pretty great about that. But
you wouldn't stop.
It's just like it's like the eye test part where it's like, well, 2.9 to 3.3, because I think what certain fans are looking for is like that number was going from 3 to 6, right?
Yes. We talked about this last year. Like this was a big standard we kind of set coming into the season. Hey, let's move the needle. Because end of last season, he had kind of that little push where it was 4 assists, 5. He said, okay, let's go into next year and start to set that benchmark of maybe 4 to 5 assists per game is where you start and build from there, right?
Right, exactly. So it's like, 15% is not nothing, but with some of these numbers, to be a playmaker, the idea was going to be, hey, that has to be 4 assists, 5 assists, 5.5, something like that, to be a really meaningful bump. And with Jordi Fernandez saying that, and defensive stuff aside, this defense has been this team has been predicated on defense over the last short term. They've been like one of the best defensive teams in the league, right? Mm-hmm. But you can these comments from Jordi make it very clear to me and to you too, that it's like, oh, there has to be more things happening. It can't just be the shots. Yep. Like if it's just the shots, then at some point there's a ceiling on what that's going to be. And we're probably putting some words in his mouth here, but I'm not sure. Like, I don't know. You felt like that was kind of definitive, but not definitive, what he's saying there, right? I mean, it's not nothing. I don't think that was just coach speak. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think that was because you can go back and think about the way maybe Jacques Vaughn would have talked about him, right? And the first iteration when you had the superstars come in, it's a big shift from where they drafted versus where the team was going. Okay, so you can kind of chalk that up to this is a weird or a big transition, and a lot of people are going to get kind of vague conversations about them. But the way that Jordi's speaking is like, if I was Cam Thomas, I'll put it in these terms. If I'm Cam Thomas, I know what the message was there. Like, I know exactly what's being said. It's awesome. You can score. That's super. If you're going to be a real fixture, or if you're going to be the type of player that we believe can be the leader of a new core going forward, then you got to be more than a guy that gets up 17, 18 shots a game and scores an efficient percentage and get to the line. You need to be someone that when defenses hone in on you, when defenses give you that extra layer of attention, you absolutely destroy them for it, right? You find the open shooters, you set up teammates in a great way. And it made me think about, we talked about Day'Ron, and you had brought this up originally with the numbers, with how good Day'Ron and D'Angelo Russell were together. And by the way, no one's saying that D'Angelo Russell and Cam Thomas come out of the same hat in terms of skill set or expectations. But that matters, because Day'Ron Sharpe, well, people are really excited about his game the other night, and you want to see more of him. And you want to probably say Cam Thomas can be the guy that when Day'Ron comes on the court, you go ahead and elevate his play. You make him a better player. There's a really, really cliche term that I hate from the NFL that gets used a lot, which is this guy's a force multiplier. I think it's the dumbest thing in the world, but that's probably what they're talking about. We want you to make other guys better and make their game easier. And that's the next phase. Anybody who has the elite scoring talent like Cam does can always be that guy. But that's not always going to translate to wins as opposed to individual stats.
Yeah, I mean, there aren't a lot of players in the league who are like the best players in their team that don't contribute across the stat line. And by the way, I think counting stats can fool you sometimes. So I'm not like, just pro, box score maximalizing here, where I'm like, just like it's, because we've seen plenty of empty stats. But you don't get as many empty stats when you have lots of stats happening across the box score. Now it can happen. Like you can get the Josh Giddeys of the world that if they stay out there long enough can kind of be triple double threats. And you're like, I don't know, is it overall contributing massively to winning? It's like a little hard to tell. So I'm not going to say that it can't happen, But there has to be more than like 0, right? Like it has to be like it has to be. I'm not saying
what's the line for freaking Sarah Marshall? Well, now you're just doing nothing. You got to do something.
Yeah, like, and so I think that's probably what Jordy's saying too. It's like, okay, yeah, you can have a little rust here, but when we go and this the Nets offense stinks. So it's not like he's not like he did not pass the ball, right? Like the offense is so brutal right now. But 721 minutes, 1 assist. These have been the numbers year over year. Like, I think they just want to see that other step, and whether or not they're putting them into positions to be able to do it. Like, again, the rest of these guys, it's not like this is a bunch of offensive dynamos around him. And if I was him too, and I could score like him, I'd be real hesitant to pass the ball because to who? Killian Hayes for what?
I was gonna say, like, especially on a team that like really struggles offensively, you want me to incorporate more guys, or would you kind of want me to explore the studio space?
Of course. So like he should take a shot. So no one's even saying that. I think it's like this. Yeah. I'm like pro Cam Thomas here. I think it's mostly just that there's probably it's mostly us just speaking to I think what Jordy said, which is like, okay, I think we're getting a clear view of the things they probably want to see from him over this final 20 plus game stretch. We'll see how much he plays, but I think there is a very clear thing. I think they want to see it. I think the quotes like this are like, hey, we need to see it. We're going into the offseason. We're going to be in a contract negotiation. Like, we know you can do this thing. You're great at this thing for sure. When the ball in your hand, he's among the elite guys in the game that can like get a bucket, like get bucket getters. He's one of these dudes for sure. But there just have to be other stuff. Like you have to have gravity. You have to be able to, use your gravity to make other players better. Like you have to use that stuff to sort of expand the range of the offense. And I think he has it in him for sure. We've seen flashes of it. And I think, I just think it's very clear, like, oh, we need to see this now. Like we need to see this going into the summer. You have some games here to kind of make it happen. The offense is set up in a lot of movement. Like there's a lot of movement. There is back cutting. Like these guys are in motion a lot. There's opportunities to find players for open shots. They for sure have that in the offensive system that they're trying to run. They don't have a lot of guys who can score, but they're trying. Like it's not just clear the way and we'll run it and we'll try to get a shot up with 4 seconds in the shot clock. Like that's not what they're doing on offense. So I think there are opportunities for this, and it's just gonna be a matter of like whether or not there's like a willingness to be able to do it. It'll be interesting. This is a fascinating kind of storyline for the final remainder of the season, I think.
Yeah, and coming up here in a second, we're going to get into what is the outlook here ultimately for Cam Thomas. How much can he move the needle? Where would you see him fitting in? And as we talked about before, what's the general consensus around Cam Thomas in the league? A couple more key stats along the way as well. We'll do that here coming up in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about friends over at DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh you save thanks to Dash Pass. Every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. Super simple. Any player in the NBA, not just the Nets, in the NBA scores 50 or more in a game during this NBA regular season. Dash Pass members get 50% off and order up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. I think it's a guy on the team, right? We're talking about him right now, a guy that's a candidate to be able to score 50 in a game. Cam Thomas can get there. Keep an eye out for it. Get game day feasts going, late night cravings, lunch on the go. It's all there for you from our friends over at DoorDash. You sign up for the Dash Pass, be ready to save when a player scores 50 or more in a game. Dash Pass members get 50% off that order the next day, up to $10 off. Use the promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more.
All right, as we tie a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Cam Thomas, his return, and then his potential outlook. So one of the things, and listen, this is, everything has been fluid. This team has been bad. There's a lot of flux here. Cam Thomas, going back over these last few seasons, when he's on the court, over 3,000 minutes, 3,658 minutes, teams a minus 4.67, 114.37 offensive rating, 119.03 defensive rating. When he's off the court, over 7,000 minutes, over 7,100 minutes, a minus 1.42 rating, a 112.72 offensive, 114.14 defensive rating. And you can go just inside of this season and see that it's kind of marginally the same. And I think that just speaks to this again. Whatever the combinations are, whoever's on the court, off the court, are you making an impact in that way? So with the draft coming up and all these things are going to happen this offseason, do you have any sense? We've said this before, and the answer is always, I don't know. I think it's ultimately. But do you have any sense that when we get to this offseason, the Nets are going to say, this is how we feel about Cam Thomas. Here's the contract. And ironically enough, we've talked a lot about Nick Claxton this season and what that's looked like. And they didn't seem to have a problem committing big money to him. But it does feel like it's going to be a different conversation when it comes to Thomas potentially.
I mean, they were kind of clear on Nick Claxton at this point that like they were going to re-sign him. If I'm remembering this correctly, it did not seem like I don't think there was ever a question with Claxton about whether or not they would offer him money. It was only a question of like, hey, would the market go higher than they were comfortable? That was really the question. It wasn't will they in terms of like an offer. This I almost don't even want to guess. Like I feel like to say they're for sure going to offer him something. I don't think that's like, but I'm not like 1,000% on it. I'm not really sure. This has been one of the more confusing storylines since we've been on this podcast, right? Like we've been covering the Nets, all the way back to before Cam Thomas was in the draft, right? So it's like this among all the different stuff of a team that's been very confusing. This has always been one of the most confusing ones, and that says a lot because this team has been massive bunch of question marks over the years for a variety of different, sometimes inane reasons. But this is one I've just never felt comfortable. I've never felt like I had a handle on it. I've never felt like I had a handle on how the Nets feel about it, how the league feels about it. I forget the fans. You can't even talk to them about it, this guy. And so forget that
side mission talking to them. Good Lord.
Well, you just like you're asking for it because there's asking for it. We've been down this road many times. It's like there's no middle ground on this guy. You either think he is a superstar that the Nets have totally mistreated. That's one. That's team one. And team two is you think he's empty stats, empty calories, just overrated, and don't want on the team. I'm literally saying it. There's very few Cam Thomas centrists around Nets land. Everyone kind of has their opinion set, and that's how it is. And I just think when going into the season, looking at tying money on the books, they've been very clear they want to keep things fluid. It's been very clear that they want to like not tie themselves into like long-term money at this point, right? Like I don't know. What do you think? Yeah. And I also say that my bag is not like predicting contracts. I just know that is not a strong suit of mine. So I almost like I'm double hesitant to not say something here because I just think that like I don't have amazing handles on sometimes like the exact years and money around some of this stuff. Some people are great at that, like can blink test this, but I just know I'm not. I mean, what do you think? It's like I could go probably any which way on this one.
Yeah, I would be shocked if there wasn't an offer this offseason and not in the necessarily same money range. Obviously, it's Nicholas Claxton, $100 million contract, 4 years. But the 4 years probably makes sense. Like the age lines up, right? You want to have control of this kid as he heads towards his prime. Now, depending on what I think is fascinating is depending on what number they settle on. And we've talked about this kind of like with D'Angelo Russell. What's the number? Would they really care if they gave him a 3-year, $45 million contract because he's a veteran XYZ? They probably have the money to spend. Likewise, if you give Cam Thomas some type of contract in the 15 to 20 million AAV type of range, does that mean it's a commitment to Cam Thomas? No. I think it means it's a commitment to what they know he's capable of. And then you go and then you have the draft and you get all the rookies in and you see who fits or doesn't. I don't think that at this point, Cam Thomas is precluded from being one of the, hey, we drafted a lot of guys and you're not a part of the group we're going to go forward with, right? Like, and I think that there would be a market for a player like that. If you look around the league and a team that's going to the playoffs next season says, oh, microwave, and I don't want to categorize him only as this, but microwave scorer off the bench, 6-man coming off the bench, price point is 17 million. Yeah, we probably would do a deal to get that guy into our roster, knowing that you can get a guy that goes off for 24, 26 points a night consistently. So I think that they will end up re-signing him because the value for him exists somewhere. But I don't think necessarily that if you hear the contract get signed this offseason, it's because the Brooklyn Nets are fully committed to what Cam Thomas will be for their team growing and going forward.
Yeah, I just wish that I just feel like in other situations, it's been a lot clearer, a lot closer, a lot further from the deadline, whatever it is. And the deadline's not there yet. But maybe I'm misremembering this with Claxton or even with
I think you're right on that. Because when you brought it before, I was like, I think the sense was, yeah, he's going to be here. It's a matter of price point. And like you said, somebody came and swung over the top. And even then, once the contract got signed, we said, maybe nobody was going to come over the top of what Brooklyn was willing to pay him.
Yeah, right. And it didn't ever seem like it was in doubt about the if, right? Like, I don't think it was just only around what the number was. And, to some degree, it went the other way too, where it's like they probably overpaid at the time for Claxton and Cam Johnson. Like, was the market even going to come through with these numbers? It was never totally clear. So I don't think we ever, and again, if we can go dig up the tapes and we're unclear about this, I'm happy to be wrong. It just doesn't feel correct to me. I feel like we knew that they were at least interested, and there might be something else might dictate like sort of where it goes. Here, you don't get that sense at all. Like, you don't get the sense that they're out on it, but you don't get the overwhelming sense that they're in on it. And so I guess what we're talking about is like, and then like, how does the rest of the market deal with it? I think a team, he's actually a guy in a funny way. Unlike those other two guys, I could see a situation where it's like some other team comes in over the top because the Nets go low, right? Like the Nets go low and some other team is like, no, they value it differently. And it only takes one sometimes, right? Sometimes you're not sure how these other teams around the league feel, what their internal metrics on guys are, like how they view it, like how they view a guy like him or what they think they can make him in their system, right? All these teams in the beauty's the eye of the beholder kind of thing. It's like, well, it would only take one to be out there and be like, yeah, no, that'd be a nice compliment, right? That'd be a nice compliment to what we're doing. And like, that's worth the money or whatever. And so I think it's actually maybe more of a situation where the thing that didn't happen with Claxton and CJ happens, where it's like, yeah, there's just one of those, there's someone else out there that actually values it a lot more than we do. And then he's gone. And I'll tell you, if that happens, oh baby, there'll be a Nets contingent. That group one that I mentioned before, you'll never hear the end of it. You'll never hear the end of it. Like, so anyway,
my last thought on it, and I agree with you. And my last thought on it is like, I think the biggest question Brooklyn's probably trying to answer is when you watch him with, say, Ben Simmons, and we talked about, how he'd be a good guy to help unlock Cam Thomas's game a little bit more. If you think about, well, how does he play off of a veteran like Cam Johnson, who they like and plays two-way basketball in the model that they see? Okay. Is it, well, if you're around with veterans, we actually like Cam Thomas more. If we're talking about Noah Clowney and Nicholas Claxton, Claxton's played a lot, but Day'Ron Sharp's still young relative to experience on the court. Like, do we want Cam Thomas to be one of the guys that you're dependent on to help elevate those around him? It's fascinating, man, and I agree with you. It kind of doesn't matter what happens this offseason. No matter what, there's going to be basically half the fan base, because everyone is split on it. Half the fan base is going to freak out for what they did. Half the fan base is going to freak out for what they didn't do. And the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. So it's going to be a fun one. I'm just happy that Thomas is back on the court and hopefully has a healthy run down the stretch of this season. And maybe does like definitively answer some level of questions where we can come to an answer.
Oh, I hope so. I would love some definitive stuff on this one. I would love it. Like, this has been, again,
anything
just going back to yeah, exactly. Going back to the top of the show, like, this has been the least definitive thing, one of the least definitive things for a team that's been nothing but indefinitive. Is that a word? Throughout the last couple of years. So anyway, that's a lot of couple positives and a couple of negatives, and that's how you construct the sentence. In the meantime, while you're trying to figure out what I just said, because I don't even know. Make sure that you subscribe over on YouTube, Locked On Nets. Leave a comment. I was mixing it up with someone there over in the comments. Every once in a while, a comment gets me. Some people know my absolute triggers. There's a couple. I'm not going to say what they are, but there's a few out there that if you want to get, there's a few things you can say that will just get me using all my time to comment back. So go see if you can figure it out. Go leave a comment over on YouTube.
In the meantime, though, proving yourself in a field where the casualty rate is so notoriously high is an ongoing challenge. And that, my friends, is Richard E. Grant.
One of the all-time great poets. We're back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, yeah.